coffee is a wonderful source of nutrients and antioxidants, but there's a lot of steps from the beginning of when you purchase it all the way down to what you put in the coffee itself into your mouth. There's a lot of areas for the introduction of toxins. And so this three-part series is sort of teaching you about how to minimize those toxins. So today we're going to talk a bit about the preparation of it, as well as like what you're carrying the coffee in. So last week I did get a question about organic versus non. And my feeling about this is that most people should go organic with just about everything, if you can afford it. But with coffee in particular, it's a sort of an interesting crop because it is heavily sprayed by pesticides. It's a high yield, it's a high cash crop, so they want to make sure the product is going to carry through. So the idea though is that because it has a high pesticide, it also gets roasted. And so part of the roasting process, about 75 to 85% of the pesticides do degrade. I personally feel that when you are grounding something up into a fine powder, you're actually increasing the surface area of the coffee. And you're also bringing in this extra element, which most pesticides don't have, which, when you're eating pesticides on food, is that you're bringing in hot, boiling water. And just from my basic knowledge of chemistry and science, anytime you bring in heat, that's going to sort of add an interesting dynamic to a chemical. So I personally don't like to expose myself to that, and I do prefer to do organic for that reason, because I really don't want to any sort of metabolites left over from the degradation of pesticides, and even the pesticides that are actually left in it, the residues. I really don't want that in my body. So my take is I do organic, but it's not going to be as heavily sprayed from the standpoint of what's going into your body, like let's say an apple or any of the dirty dozen. Okay. For decaf though, I would say definitely go organic. So I spoke about that in a previous session, so there it is. But today we are going to talk a bit about preparation, and there's about 3 different types or sort of methods that most people use. And again, the idea is that you maximize your antioxidant intake. So the first method is like a French press or a percolating method. And the idea is that you want to interact the water with the beans. You want the beans to be basking in the water longer, because that's where most of the extraction of the antioxidants is going to happen. So those 2 methods are the best way to prepare coffee in terms of antioxidant level. Now it does impart sort of an interesting texture to it. It is a little bit thicker and a little tiny bit grainier, and that might be off-putting to some people. I personally don't mind it, but some people may not like that. You get all the grains at the very, very bottom of the French press when you're pushing it down. And one thing to note is that with French press, I will say is that there has been a couple studies showing that your LDL cholesterol levels may go up a teensy bit. Okay, so I don't really find that too problematic, but just so you're aware that there is some research out on that showing that. On a whole though, when you do the route of French press, you're going to get the highest antioxidant level, bar none. Okay, the next highest is going to be probably most people's preferred methods, which is a espresso machine or a coffee machine. And the thing about the coffee machines is that yes, they are convenient, and sometimes they're beautiful machines sitting on your countertop, but the reality is that the water actually isn't interacting with the beans as much as, let's say, a French press. So the antioxidant level is going to be lower. Okay. What we know is that the filter does block some of the antioxidants going also into the coffee. So not only is the water interacting less, but the filter is actually like restraining the nutrients into it, and you're throwing that filter away. Okay, so that's not necessarily the best method, but I understand that these coffee machines sometimes can be amazing and the product is delicious. And so if I was going to say, if you can't give that up and you don't want to do French press, you should at least choose some type of non-bleached paper liner. Okay, because you really don't need bleach going into your body, and the brown ones are a much better choice because they're just natural paper fibers. Okay, and the third and last, and I'm not going to be very popular after this, but those really beautiful fancy machines with the plastic cups that have the pre-portioned coffee in it. Now, yes, it puts out a decent product. Yes, they're gorgeous. Yes, it's convenient. But the reality is that you're putting boiling water into the plastic that's holding the coffee. So not only is it plastic in itself, but those plastic containers tend to be lined with an endocrine disruptor, okay? Some type of chemical that's going to mess with your hormones. So anyone that has any type of endocrine issue, so anyone that's got an estrogen dominant condition like PCOS, fibroids, you have heavy menstruations, you have really light menstruations, acne, anyone with diabetes, anyone that get adrenal fatigue and adrenal stress. These are all things that are going to mess with your, you're going to get impacted pretty hard by an endocrine disruptor. So you might want to think twice about exposing yourself to these things that are actually really messing with your hormones. Okay, so I know bad news bears and don't hate me, but that's kind of where I stand on the preparation processes. But we're going to talk about the next thing, which is how does the coffee get from the machine to your mouth? And most people do okay in this area because they prepare the coffee in their home. And it's usually glass is the preferred in terms of the material. Glass mug is probably the best, but most people use like some type of ceramic. And the only thing I would say about that is if you're going to do a ceramic mug, please make sure that it's not one of those cheap, bright colored ones from China or some, country around the world that is doing it like at a really cheap price. And the reason why is oftentimes the regulations are lower and there might be some lead in there. And by the way, this also goes for baby toys, okay? So try to avoid that because lead has no business in the body. But I would say that where most people get in trouble with is the to-go mugs. So people that are really, really busy, they're always bouncing around. They're always going from one meeting to another. They're in the conference rooms, they're in the conventions, they're in the coffee room with their buddies at work. That's sometimes where people most get in trouble. And the reason why is that it's either served in plastic, styrofoam, or some type of coffee paper cup that's lined with some type of endocrine disruptor, okay? So the problem is that these chemicals that are in these containers are actually going directly into your coffee. And again, you're putting hot water in it, which is like, again, changing the mix of things. You're changing the chemistry of it when you're adding heat to something, okay? Which means it's more likely gonna leach in it. So, oh, what's a person supposed to do, right? So I have a couple, two solutions for you. And the first one is a good old trusted stainless steel, Darth Vader, no, a stainless steel container. These puppies are great because they can get sealed up tight. You can throw them in your bag. They're super durable and absolutely nothing is gonna leach in the coffee with a stainless steel container, okay? They also happen to keep your coffee warm, which is nice, or tea, whatever. So this is my first choice. The second one, if you want sort of the Starbucks-like feel to it, is these sort of imitations of, but they're made out of ceramic. And it's got the lid on it. It's got the type of material that's not going to leach into your coffee. And that's actually really important, again. So I know it sounds a bit neurotic and it sounds a little high maintenance, but you can just throw these in your gym bag. You can throw one keep one at work and keep one in your car. So if you meet your sister for coffee, you can just grab it and go. And they are more than happy to fill this up anywhere you go. This, again, I don't ever want to be creating sort of neurotic-like behavior, but the reality is that unfortunately we live in a pretty toxic world. And if you're going to Starbucks or any coffee cafe, once or twice every couple weeks or whatever, it's no big deal. But if you're going 1 to 2 to 3 times a day, that's not only expensive, but it's also just that's toxic wise, that adds up over time. And again, if you have any type of endocrine disorder, not the best choice. So again, this isn't about neurosis, it's just about awareness, and it's about just being informed. And if you make those little changes over time, they lead up to big changes with your health in the long run, okay? So next week, we're gonna talk a little bit about what goes into the coffee, and that's kind of a big subject, whether it's MCT oil or non-dairy creamers or so many products out there. I saved that for an entire session on its own because there's a lot of products and options for people to buy. Please come visit me at Third Eye Nutrition. I'm always giving away some type of goodie, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend and go have a great cup of coffee. Your coffee should taste better once you take all the toxins out. Cheers.